one. Fiddler doesn't score. Fiddler, it's farewell. It's farewell. And he hits it. He's got it. He's got the field goal. He's got the premiership. He has gone from, as I said, a captain to a legend, and probably rugby league immortality. That's not a try. That's a miracle.
Welcome back to the Rugby League Guru podcast. Had one of my followers, Jacob, message me about 3 or 4 weeks ago saying that he wanted to start his very own podcast. He was thinking about doing it, and now he's got his own podcast. It is called the Short Ball Podcast. I highly advise you get around it. He's obviously got his Instagram page as well, at the shortball _THESHORTBALL_. So go and check out what Jacob's doing there. He's doing some fantastic work. I believe he's also on YouTube, and he's got his podcast as well. And after he told me he was going to start his own podcast, it was a real honour for him to have me on his podcast. We talked some footy for about an hour or so. So I'm going to upload the entire podcast here so that he can get some exposure to all you guys. And hopefully you can jump over and go and listen to some of his content, or jump on his YouTube page and go and have a listen to his gear there, watch his gear on there. Jacob asked me a number of questions. We talked about the Gold Coast Titans next year, the Parramatta Eels and them fading into the back end of the season, the Canterbury Bulldogs next year. Jacob also asked me a few questions about the Rugby League Guru and where it all started and everything. So a really good chat with a champion fella. Make sure you go and check out all of his stuff, guys. As I've always said, guys, if anyone out there that is listening has their own podcast and would like me to come on for a chat, more than happy to, and I'll obviously upload it to my podcast as well. Get you a bit of exposure to my listeners, and hopefully they can come over to your platform as well and listen to you. We're all in this together in the podcast world, and rugby league content is rugby league content. We want to get everyone around everyone. It's a sensational thing. I'm going to kick off now the podcast with Jacob with the Short Ball Podcast.
G'day everyone, welcome back to the Short Ball Podcast. Today we've got a special guest on. We've got the Rugby League Guru, one of the best analysis of rugby league I've probably seen on Instagram. And today we'll just be going through a little bit of footy chat. First, Guru, how you going, mate?
Yeah, good, mate. All going well. It's a bit grim in lockdown at the moment, but we're getting by. Plenty of content coming out, thankfully, to keep us entertained. It's an honour to be on, mate. Thanks for having me.
I'll just start off with a few questions about you and your podcast, how it's been going. You started up as a super coach guru. You had that Instagram page that you had maybe 2 years.
Yeah, just over 2 years ago. I think it was 2018 I started that. So, yeah.
What sort of inspired the change into podcasting and starting to do just Rugby League Guru rather than Super Coach Guru?
Mate, I've always loved Super Coach. Me and my mates are way too keen on it, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners are as well. And I had a go at a NFL fantasy competition with my mates, and I know a little bit about NFL, but not enough to be able to be as competitive as I am at bloody everything I do. So I sort of seeked out and went and found a guy to help me with my NFL picks and who to pick up and everything. And funnily enough, I think he was called the Fantasy Guru or the Gridiron Guru or something like that. And then the Supercoach, I started my Supercoach page originally just to take the piss out of one of my mates. I was trying to lure one of my mates into asking a few questions, and then on draft day when we all go down the South Coast to, spring it on him and say, you were talking to me the whole time, and just reveal some of the stuff that he said. Unfortunately, he didn't say anything that incriminated him too poorly, unfortunately, but that's how it started. And then, it got to about 10, 15,000 followers. I was really enjoying it, but I was more so starting to talk about rugby league in general, which I'm obviously more passionate about than Supercoach, and I just found the amount of comments that were saying, you're just a Supercoach page, stay in your lane, which was completely fair as well. I just sort of thought, it's time for me to expand out, and then enjoying the content, and then just wanted a bit more of an avenue to be able to do my sort of stuff. So I went down the avenue of the podcast, sort of gives me a bit more of a business end to the Guru side of things as well, obviously getting sponsorship on the podcast and whatnot. So it's been a really fun avenue, mate, and all the posts are good fun, but I love sitting here talking to blokes like yourself and stuff about footy. That's where my passion lies, mate.
Yeah, no, I just remember I'd followed you back in the Supercoach Guru days. So I'd needed.
God, you've been through it far out. You've seen some shit.
Still do need help the way I'm going. I've done like the Parramatta Eels and sort of shit the bed in the back end of my Supercoach season.
No stranger to shit in the bed, don't worry.
Yeah, no, a good old famous bed shit never hurt anybody. But just want to go on to the next one. You were on Bloke in a Bar's podcast the other day, that 4-hour long podcast.
What an epic that was. Far out, went forever, mate.
It's a marathon. I think I got about 2 hours in, and then he had to go and do schoolwork. So I was just
2 hours is enough. Trust me.
No, I just made sure I got around to the Parramatta stuff, so I could just get what you had to say about that in. How did that come around, and sort of what was it like to be involved with Denon and that sort of that podcast? How big it is?
Yeah, mate, it was unreal, to be honest with you. A bit of I like to think I don't have too many of those like those fanboy sort of moments, you know. But that was a really big step for me as far as going on that podcast and just being invited on with two former players to talk footy. Rugby league's a bit like, the way I described it is like it's a bit like high school, and it's like it's almost like when the popular kids sort of approve of you in high school, it sort of changes a little bit. And I've noticed that over the last few days, which is just as crazy as it sounds. But as soon as, you know, a Denham Kemp says that he likes my posts and they make sense to former players, it sort of just changes the way that a lot of people look at my page. And I've had a lot of people message me and say that over the last few days. So going on there was unreal, mate. And mate, I'm like you. I'm just a rugby league nut. So to be able to sit next to a guy like Brett Finch for 4 hours and talk footy, Finch is a guy that I watched growing up and absolutely loved, and just loved the way that he went about his footy and travelled around. And obviously he's Robert Finch's son, so there's a heap of rugby league history, and he's, you know, some of the stuff that Finchy's seen and that he's been through is just unreal to be able to sit with him and talk, and even talk to him off mic. He's a very different bloke off camera to what he is on camera. And I mean, he's a guy that was doing, you know, he was one of the faces for Channel 9 2 or 3 years ago. So to be able to sit next to him and talk footy was unreal. And Denon's just, he's a genius, mate. He plays the role of, you know, being one of the boys, which he is, but he's so smart that it's that side of people that I don't think people see enough of. And when you walk into that studio and you see how organised it all is, you know, all the little tiny things that he does, you would never see coming across your Instagram page or your Instagram stories, was unreal to see. He really is top shelf professional, and he's good at what he does. You know, everyone just thinks he's the funny guy that talks shit, but he really is a smart fella, mate, and he's done incredibly well. I mean, I'm talking to you now, and you know, you've got your Bloke in a Bar jumper on, which is unreal, and it's crazy to think that a guy that played, you know, 45 first grade games has done what he's done. Like, there's been, and that's no knock on Denon. If anything, it's a compliment that there's been guys that have achieved so much more in our game, but they haven't been able to do what he's been able to do as far as media and everything goes, even with the help of League, Channel 9, these sort of big things. Denon's just done it off his own back. So it's incredibly impressive what he's done, mate. And yeah, it was a pretty surreal feeling to get the opportunity to go in there and just sit with them and just learn from Denon and what he does, how he goes about social media, podcasting and everything. It was unreal, mate.
Yeah. No, that just sounds like a dream come true for me. I love sitting there watching their round reviews. Sort of the inspiration for my last podcast that they came out with a round review. But I love sitting there listening to Brett Finch as well. Like, some of the stuff that he says about footy, you can tell he's been through the wars. And
he's a genius, mate. He's got one of the best footy brains in our game, and I don't know, just because of off-field stuff and because he's got a stigma to him, people, I don't know. I think it's very unfair how he's been treated by Fox League and Channel 9. And, you know, even when I put up posts, you know, where me and Finchy were talking the other day, and the amount of comments that came in like, oh, is he off his head? Is he high? Is he drunk? Like, the narrative that the media sells you about Brett Finch is nothing like what the real Brett Finch is like. I sat with him for 45 minutes before we started recording our podcast, and mate, I couldn't shut him up about his daughter. There was no stories about benders or drugs or any of that stuff that the media portrays to you that Brett Finch is like. He's a real down-to-earth guy. He's a champion fella, and I just love spending time with him, whether it was on or off the podcast. He's just a real fella to talk to and a great football mind.
I've got a lot of respect for Finchy. Like, I know a lot of the stuff that he's sort of been criticised about, you just think, like, what do you have something better to do than just bag some bloke who's providing a lot in this sort of industry, and like the podcasting industry and the footy industry in general, with some of the knowledge that he can impart on people. And the main thing that they focus on is that whole, is he high? Is he on drugs, benders, all that sort of stuff.
And it's funny, mate, like Finchy provides so much content, so many great stories that people love, and they tell their mates about it and they laugh and it brings enjoyment to them. But then they're also the first people to try and bring him down for that same, like, it's just very backwards. It's always been the way in rugby league. We love a character until we've got a character, and then we want to bring them down again. And Finchy's just been the scapegoat of that for too long. But hopefully social media and the way that rugby league's heading now, we are sort of starting to change that narrative through guys like Brandon Smith, Josh Adokar, these sort of fellas. So it's good to see, mate.
Yeah, well, it's the sort of good and bad of social media. You can get a lot more insight, but then there's the people that get on there, use it as a form to just bag people, which, like, I'll never agree with that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
like,
I think it was I think it was Isaac John said to me once that, if you have a hammer, like you can kill someone with a hammer, or you can build a house with it. Social media is the same. You can do so many good things, but you can also so easily do so many bad things. Like I'd love for people to see on a page like mine, or like Clarkie's, or NRL Roast, or Denon's, like the amount of people that make fake profiles and add us and then start commenting shit that we have to block and restrict. It's just the amount of people that made a page, like, mate, the amount of people that have added me in the last 18 months and their Instagram name is Jack DeBellin. It's just like just trying to get that cheap shit, or the amount that are named Brett Finch and try and just comment stupid shit like they're off their head and stuff. It's really unfortunate, but it is a small minority. But unfortunately, mate, small minorities, they're normally the loudest, aren't they?
Yeah, no, you definitely notice that. Even like there's some trend going around Instagram now to bloody, there's Buzz Rothfields and Brad Fittlers and that they're coming underneath everything. Like,
the best thing about those is, mate, on pages like mine and Roasty as well, I know for sure that what they don't realise is that there's a restrict button, so we can restrict them. So what it means is that they're commenting on every post on social media trying to get attention, but no one else can see it other than them.
Yeah.
So you got these guys constantly trying to get attention, and they're wondering why no one's liking their stupid comments, which then pushes them to try harder on the next one. And what they don't realise is that, people, like myself, like NRL Roast, like we don't want that sort of shit getting around. Like, no, it might be funny the first time you see it, the 7th, 8th, and the 500th time, it's just ridiculous, Yeah,
my view on it is that they all saw what that fake Gus Gould account was doing.
Yep.
Like that original one, I found it hilarious for a little bit.
Yeah, same.
Everyone started to try and take that sort of mold and just try and, I don't know, get clout from a sort of idea.
Same sort of thing, though. That Gus Gould one, when you first saw it, it was hilarious. I mean, here we are a few months on, and we still, it's one of those things that if you're the first guy, it's funny. If you're the 5th, 100th guy, I mean, it's a very different story,
Question I got for you: where did the love for rugby league originate from? Like, what was your childhood like with rugby league? How did it sort of all come about?
Yeah, and I've just always loved the game. I grew up in Sydney, so played footy when I was younger. It wasn't too crash hot, realistically. And I don't know, just always loved the game, mate. Love watching it. I grew up sort of in the eastern suburbs, so we're members of the SFS, so it meant that, I could go and watch every single game there. And back in the day, like the Roosters played there, the Rabbitohs played there. So you at least had one game of footy on every single weekend at the SFS, which was unreal. Then finals would come around, there'd be games played there as well. So, mate, I was very lucky where I grew up that I was able to go and watch footy. My family's always been footy fanatics. My old man coached me, then my uncle coached me, and now I'm coaching an under-16 side with my uncle that coached me, and we're coaching his son, So we're just a rugby league mad family. My girlfriend, who I've been with for 4 or 5 years, her family are the most South Sydney crazed fans of all time. Like, it's just, it's batshit crazy. But I absolutely love that. I'm not a South fan myself. I don't have a team, but I just love being around rugby league. It's unreal. There's just nothing better than it. Still coaching now. I had someone message me the other day and say, how much do you get paid to coach? And I just went, fuck, you don't know anything about junior footy, do you? Like, it's passion and nothing more, essentially. You'd know that yourself. You're around the junior grades and stuff like that. But, mate, I've just always loved the game, and I love the direction it's heading over the last few years through, heaps of other pages, including myself, where we are starting to head down a more positive route as far as our players go and the way that we react to moments and stuff like that. And, I sort of started off, sharing scores and updates and all that sort of stuff, but it's more been my personal analysis and all that as I've moved forward, which is something I've really enjoyed. I'm one of those guys. I'm like you. I could sit at a pub at a table and could have 8 different blokes walk in over 6 hours of Super Saturday, and mate, I'd be in my element, whether I'm talking to one person at a pub or on the podcast talking to a few thousand people. Just love the game like yourself, mate.
No, that's sort of how I've started. Like, you just sort of reminded me how I've kind of come about. Me and one of my mates, this is how my podcast idea sort of came around. One of my mates used to have phone calls for like 4 hours, 5 hours just talking about footy. Like, we would just sit there, talk about para, because we were both mad para fans. We'd just be sitting there talking about how the round went, how teams will go in the future. And I just sort of sat there thinking, like, I've been watching Bloke in a Bar, Hello Sports, one of them.
How good's Hello Sports? Far out. I love those blokes, mate. They are unreal.
No, the only knock on them is the fact they always bag and para.
They give it to para, yeah.
That's sort of how it started for me as well. And I just love talking footy. And that, like, all my mates gave me the nickname Gus like 3 months ago, because they just give it to me about how I sort of analyse footy and all the stats I bring up randomly, all that sort of thing. So, yeah sort of similar to you.
Nah, mate, I've been in my mates, when I was coming through school, they used to tell me that I had rugby league autism, because I could just remember anything and everything that was completely random about rugby league, but couldn't tell you where my keys were, So, I'm in a very similar boat. I've been called Gus a fair few times on my page and in person too. It's unreal.
No, just started to talk a little bit of footy. We'll get the flow state going on the footy. We'll start with para, obviously my team, diehard fan. We'll just start off with how they've sort of faded in this last 10 rounds, or the last sort of 5 to 6 rounds. Just brought up a few stats for you.
Yep.
They've lost 5 of their last 7, as you know. But the main concerning thing for mine, which is a trend that I saw last year, was their attacks just faded. They averaged 14.5 points per game in the last 7 rounds. Last year, in the last 10 rounds, they averaged 18 points per game. What do you think sort of the issue with their attack and how their attack goes in the back half?
Mate, I'm not sure if it's specifically their attack or their defense. I just feel like this is a team that they get to the back end of the season and there starts to be some pressure on them. There starts to be expectations. And I'm starting to wonder if it's a psychological thing, to be honest with you. I mean, like their attack does this every year. Like, every single year we get to this back end and they look unreal, they look great, and then they get to the business end and they just fall off. And I kind of feel sorry for them that this year, the way that the draw has played out, that like they've had to play the top 5 teams over including the next 2 weeks. They're going to have to play the top 5 teams over, was it 6 to 7 weeks? You'd know better than me, but I remember looking at that draw and just going, good God, like, this is a team that they've always struggled to play finals footy in the first place. Now they have to play 2 months of finals footy. It's a tough gig. And I mean, mate, there's only about 4 other teams in this competition that you could replace Parramatta with and give them that draw and they'd be okay. The other 12 would struggle as well. I think it's just because Parramatta and who they are, and it's been so long since they've won. Like, it all sort of builds to the narrative of that sort of chokers tag almost. And like, I'm sure you'd be able to talk about it more than me, because you'd hear it all the time and feel it all the time. But I do feel sorry for them, how this draw has played out. And I look at their side and so many really talented footballers in that team. There's no doubt about that. Like, I think Mitch Moses is unreal. Reid Marnie was arguably the form hooker of this competition. I love Nathan Brown. Junior Paulo's one of the best front rowers in the game. Matto, like, I could talk about this side all day. And when you look at their team, nowhere that you really need to massively upgrade. You got solid players everywhere. You don't have the best players in the position anywhere, but you also just like that real winner for me. I feel like when down in games and they're in crunch moments like they have been the last few weeks, they don't have that Cameron Munster or that, the Cameron Smith last year or the Tom Trbojevic. They just don't have that James Tedesco, that one guy that they can give the ball to and they can just create something out of nothing. And it's really hard to create that guy without having someone to guide that guy in the first place. Like when I was talking to Finchy the other night, I said to him like what sort of an influence did playing with Brad Fittler and Laurie Daly have on you? And he said, oh mate, like it just lifts everyone on the field around you. I feel like Parramatta, whilst they've got really good players, they don't have that specific guy that just takes them to another level. As an Eels fan, what would you say to that?
I think Clint Gutherson as a player is, I feel, exactly how the team is. Like he's our captain and he's the physical embodiment of what our team is because his effort areas are phenomenal. Like I'd say he has the biggest crack of nearly anyone in the comp, but he's just not that X factor. Like he doesn't come out and take a game on his back and break through 5 tackles and draw him past the fullback, that sort of stuff. That's why I wanted Katoni Staggs when there was talks around him signing with the club. I thought he would have been great. And with our current side, the guy who I think can be that guy for us in the future, especially if we give him some good mentorship, would be Dylan Brown. I think as a 20-year-old 5'8", the way he's playing is phenomenal. Like people are bagging him this year. They forget that he's only 20 and then he hasn't had much experience in the NRL.
He's also had injuries as well that have really, they've really crippled him. Like those first few years are just so important. And I mean, like we've all had a bad back at one point. We know how much it can just affect everything. And I really do feel sorry for Dill because I've got huge raps on him as well, mate. I completely agree.
I don't mind the idea. I've spoken about this with my old man on the last podcast and podcast before, but I don't mind the idea of Dylan Brown going a fullback, give him a little bit more room in attack because he'd be getting the ball off the halves, give him a little bit more running room because I think his running game is the most destructive part about him. He can break through tackles, make line breaks, has good run meters, like the sort of stuff that he could do at fullback would allow him to open up his game a lot more, in my opinion. What's your sort of thoughts on that?
Mate, when I was on that podcast the other night, Denon had a really interesting take, which I've never even really thought about. He said he'd move him into the centres, and I straight away sort of went, oh, geez, I don't know about it, because I just love him so much at 5'8". Personally, I would rather have him in the spine than out in the centres, so I would rather have him at fullback than there, but I just think where it gets hard. I just think Parramatta, they've got to find a way to sign a guy that's a true winner. Like when I have a look at your squad, off the top of my head, I think there's 2 guys that have won premierships. Blake Ferguson's one of them. I mean, he's not in your side week to week realistically, and he's a winger. Your other one is Ryan Madison, who I'm a big fan of Matto, but he was coming off the bench in that Rooster side. Like he wasn't a real role player in that team, you know what I mean? So it becomes really hard to go to that next level when you've got no one that has gone to that next level before. And I feel like they just need to find a way to, and I don't even care what position it is. Honestly, if it's anywhere from 7, 6 or 1 that you can find one of those guys, bring them in. If it's going to be a 7, I move Mitch Moses to 6. I move Dylan Brown and Guthrie around. I find spots for them. If it's a fullback, I move Guthrie around. I would be happy to move any of those guys around out of their positions as long as you could accommodate that guy to come in. But if I'm a big name player who I know that I've won premierships, I know that I can win more competitions, with all due respect to you, I think it's going to be tough for someone to convince me to go to Parramatta. There's just so much pressure and expectation, and it's a tough gig. And God, like I feel for Parramatta fans like yourself, because you're always relevant. You're always in the top 6 teams. I mean, I called you a top 4 team all season, and whilst you're not a top 4 team now, I mean, compared to the rest of the competition, like you might as well be, like you're always going to be in that top 6. I just can't see you taking that next step to put you in that conversation with Melbourne, Manly, Penrith. You know what I mean?
I've sort of thought it and said it for the last few years. I'm not sure how we don't have a Cameron Munster, like you said. We don't have a Tom Trbojevic. Like I've got raps on a lot of our players. I think they're all very quality players, but we just don't have a guy that's going to take us to the promised land.
Yep. And those guys are hard to find too. Like I'm making it sound easy. Just go and get one of them. It's a hard thing to do. It's damn difficult.
I'm hoping. At this point, it's just off a hope and a prayer, but I'm hoping Dylan Brown can become that guy once he hits the peak. Like you talk about the peak for a half being 27 to 30. I think once he hits that sort of age group, I think he can be that guy for us. But at the moment, I'm finding it hard to believe anybody would come and sign with us, especially with the guys we're trying to re-sign at the moment for our next year. It's just going to be tough.
I think your big test with Dylan Brown, obviously. How old is he? 22? 20? Is he a little bit older?
I thought he was 21.
Okay, well, mate, let's say he's 21, 22. I mean, for him to play his best footy, that's 5 years away. I mean, are you confident you're going to be able to keep Dylan Brown for the next? I mean, people are criticising the hell out of him right now after people were praising him so much last year. I mean, and I know for a fact that there will be other clubs that are looking at Dylan Brown. You know, the teams at the top would be crazy not to go after a Dylan Brown, especially now when his value is potentially a little bit down. I think it's going to be hard for you guys to keep Dylan Brown moving forward.
I'm hoping we don't lose him. The guys in the team that I value as our priority signings over the next few years are Reid Marnie, Dylan, obviously, and Mitch Moses. Like, I think those guys are going to be super important for us. Keeping our spine intact is going to be just as important as any other. Like, our forward pack's amazing, but I'd prioritise making sure our spine stays intact at the moment.
Do you not put Gutho in that group for a reason, or? To be honest with you, I kind of agree with you, but yeah, proceed.
Gutho just worries me a little bit with the way he's been playing the last few weeks. I love him as a player. He's probably my favourite player at the moment, but he's just starting to creep into his game. There's all the talk around him wanting more than what he's on at the moment. I value him as maybe a 750, 800,000 sort of player. I think if he starts asking for more than that, you start to turn towards your younger blokes and say, well, we got to keep these guys. We can't be paying you over that sort of margin. I love him as a player, and his effort and his leadership. You can tell it affects our side in a positive way. Yep. You don't know. You don't know with him at the moment.
I think it'd be really interesting to see you guys without Clint Gutherson. I mean, off the top of my head, I don't think he's missed much footy over the last few years. Like, it'd be interesting.
Yeah, he had that ACL injury a few years back, but apart from that, he hasn't really had anything.
He hasn't, like over the last 2 or 3 years off the top of my head, I don't remember him being out for 2. It would be really interesting to see guys go without Clint Gutherson to see if he is as impactful as what. Like, I agree with you, mate. I think he's a really good player. I think he's a top 10 fullback, but the gap between probably the 5th best fullback and the 6th best fullback is massive, and he sort of sits on that other side of the top 5, you know what I mean?
No, I'd say we just need an X factor. Like, Gutherson, love his work, love what he's provided for us as a club, but he's not that guy. He's just not that guy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, he's a great leader, mate, and as you said, the effort he puts in, no one could ever question that. No matter how much you might not like Gutho or whatever, you could not possibly question how hard he goes and the effort he puts into it. And like the other day, he got in a bit of trouble for swearing and yelling on the field. I mean, shows he cares, you know, shows that he genuinely wants to win, which I would never question that of Gutho, but it says more about the high-end talent in the fullback position in the rest of the competition than what it says about Gutho for me.
If we can't get another fullback that's on par with Gutho or has a little bit more X factor than what Gutho has, I'm more than happy to sign him for 900,000, because you think about signing someone and people say, oh, boot this bloke off the team, we don't want him anymore. But you got to realise there's not much else out in the market to try and replace that bloke. When Mitchell Moses was in contract talks, everybody was saying, nah, get rid of him, don't want him here, he's not going to win a premiership for us. And I just thought, well, who are you going to replace him with? Who else is out in the market that's better than him, sort of thing?
Yeah, and that's your big thing, mate. If you're going to let go of one of your top 3 best players, you need to replace them with a player that's better than them. And there's not many of them around. Like, as far as Mitch Moses goes, like, as far as I'm concerned, I think there's only about 6 halfbacks in this competition you genuinely want to be in your team wearing the 7. And Mitch Moses, he's probably at the back end of that, but he's one of those ones that I think if I've got Mitch Moses, at least I am a really good chance to play finals footy this year. There's a lot of other halfbacks you're not, and the other good halfbacks are all signed up somewhere or not really leaving anytime soon. It's Yeah, I think you said we're going to touch on junior footy later, but I think it is definitely, as far as halves goes, the development of halves through junior grades is something that to be seriously looked at.
Yeah, we'll just go on now. We talked about para for a fair bit of time. We'll go on to our arch rivals, the Hello Sport Boys team, Manly. I'm hating what I'm seeing out of Manly, not because they're playing bad footy, because they're playing great footy, and I hate to see it personally. But you got to congratulate Des on what he's done with this side. Like a few of the guys that he's picked up, like Humala Kuatu, Taniela Paseka. I love the look of them. And they're all young blokes as well. I think this squad, if they can keep it together, and especially with the juniors coming through, which we'll touch on in a second, they could be a dynasty for the next 10 years, 15 years. It's scary.
Yeah, mate. I think especially when I was on Denon's podcast the other day, we were given this massive notepad. It was huge. It was about 300 pages, and I went through every team, and it said when guys were signed up to, when they were coming off contract. And when you look at the way that the Manly have balanced their squad, honestly, it's unbelievable. Like they got DCE coming off contract in 2023, I think it was. So what's that? Including this year, that's another 3 more seasons. And you would assume that DCE would be done after that. And once he is done, going to free up so much money there. And then they've got like 4 or 5 of these young guys that you've just spoken about in, Schuster, Olakuatu, these sort of guys coming off contract at the end of 2023 as well. I think it's going to time perfectly. And I think the other advantage for Manly is that their team is going to be built around Jake and Tom, who are real traditionalists. They are Manly through and through. I believe they would take less money to stay at Manly, to give them an opportunity to buy other guys to be successful. It's I was saying on that podcast the other night, it's incredible how it's landed that these two are proper Manly juniors, and thankfully for Manly, they're the 2 best blokes in the world, and you just know that they will take a little cut here and there to be able to keep the quality guys around them. And fuck, even if they don't, the way that Tom's playing, he could have you and me around him, couldn't he? Like, he's just unbelievable.
He's in the greatest form run I think I've ever seen personally. I look back to 2009 Jared Hayne, and watching that, I was only real young, but that's what inspired me to get into footy. I started playing footy the next year, and I started running around doing the Hayne playing. But the form that Jared Hayne was in that year, I don't think it's as good as what Tom Trbojevic is doing. Tom Trbojevic at the moment is doing whatever he wants to whoever he wants. He's just unbelievable at the moment. And I think you talked about the contracts for Manly. I think I saw that part. Isn't it like 15 of 17 of their starting squad at the moment don't come off contract till like 2024 or whatever it was?
Mate, it's crazy to think, like, when you look at that side now and it's going to stay the same for the next 2 years, those kids are only going to improve. And like you have a look at their starting 13 at the moment, or like at full strength a couple of weeks ago. I mean, they didn't have Josh Alloy, they don't have Curtis Sirinen in that 13, and they're not missing them at all. Could you imagine how many teams would be begging to have those 2 guys in their footy side? It's unbelievable.
No, they're unbelievable at the moment. And what I wanted to touch on, because I watched a lot of their footy during the Howard Matthews season, and I know how the SG ball side went, didn't watch as much of them. But Howard Matthews and SG ball side to Manly are also phenomenal. Like that junior system they've got in place could mean those guys can just slot in as well, fill in key positions.
Oh, mate, that Harold Matts, I only got to see them play twice, but it was boys versus men, wasn't it? They were just incredible. And it's, the Harold Matts competition's always the same. You check the scores every Sunday night or whatever and see what happened. And it's just, you just saw Manly scoring 40, 50, 40, 50, like just unreal. And then I can't remember who I got to see them play against, because my brother's playing in the Harold Matts, and I don't think he ended up playing Manly that season in the end of it. But the 2 games that I saw them play, they were unreal. So a heap of local talents there, and Manly being Manly, they'll keep so many of these guys. And that's the other thing. The big advantage you get with Tom and Jake is that they're going to be down around those Harold Matthews games. So these guys are looking up to those fellas. They want to come into that system. And mate, the other one we haven't even spoken about is Fainu. I mean, if he's not the best hooker at that club, I'll give it away. Like, it's crazy to think where they are. Like, with all due respect to Lachlan Croker, he's a good solid 9, but mate, I'll take 70% of Fainu over 100% of Croker,
Yeah. No, Fainu is going to be very, very good for them if he comes back, when he comes back. And that spine's going to look phenomenal, isn't it? Like in the coming years. I know Daly Cherry Evans and Kieran Foran are probably close to the end of their career, but then you replace Kieran Foran with Josh Schuster. He just walks up into the sixth spot. He's a phenomenal player. Got massive raps on him.
Yeah.
And then you got Matthew Fainu. Like he'll have a few years in him once he comes back. Hopefully he does come back. I love watching him play. Tom Trbojevic, he's only 24. Like that's another scary thing about him. He has another 8 years of footy left in him.
This might not be his best, and that's the thing. You think about, let's say DCE and Foz retire in 2 years' time. I mean, every single halfback on the market, if they're not going to the Roosters or to the Melbourne Storm, you know where they're going to want to go to next. They're going to want to play with Tom Trbojevic. Anyone that wants to win a premiership wants to be at a club that can win it, and Manly is always going to be one of those as long as they've got Tom Trbojevic in their side. So it helps their recruitment as well. I mean, going back to the Parramatta example, I mean, there's not too many guys in that Parramatta team that I'm like, oh, if I go there, I can win a comp with him. Whereas you look at that Manly side and straight away you go, Tom and Jake, I can lift a trophy there just by standing near those guys, you know?
Yeah. No, they're ridiculously good players. I'd give anything to have Tom on my team, Jake on my team, and they're in key positions as well. Like the 1 and the 13 in the modern game of footy are arguably the best, arguably two of the most important positions on the field. You'd throw the 7 into there as the other really important one, but apart from that, you look at the teams with good, the teams that are going good at the moment. You think Roosters, Storm, even though Roosters are injured and they're very wounded, but you look at their 1 and the 13, even Panthers, and they're just phenomenal players. Like their key positions are filled by great players. Not to say, like for Parra, Gutherson and Nathan Brown, they're phenomenal players, but not X factors like Tom Trbojevic and Jake Trbojevic or Victor Radley and James Tedesco. These are ridiculous.
Yeah, oh mate, it's scary, and it's you almost feel sorry for Parramatta because they are a really, really good team. They are heaps better than 12 teams in this competition, but they're just not as good as the other 4. And you guys would cop less criticism if you were 11th instead of 6th. Realistically, like it's so rough and it's so heavy on Brad Arthur, but you also want to be a team that can win a competition, not stays relevant, you know, because these windows, they close so quickly. And I mean, what you know better than me. What was your last prem? 86. So it's, you know, sorry to bring it up, but you know, 30 or 40 odd years, and you know, we saw the, you know, 2001 you should have won. Shit the bed there. Fucking, I still don't know how you didn't win that premiership. 09 came around, weren't able to get the job done there, and if this current window closes without a premiership, that is serious trouble.
It'll be devastating.
Oh, mate, I don't even go 4 years, and it'll be devastating for me, you know, because those guys, they've worked hard enough to be higher than where they are. I think now it's just a psychological thing, to be honest with you.
With what BA has done for the club and what Gutherson's done for the club, they deserve to win a premiership. This Storm side, this Manly side, this Panthers side, I don't see them going away for the next 5-10 years.
Just before we get off that, I was actually thinking the other day, you obviously signed a young fullback from Manly a couple of years ago, Clint Gutherson. Can you imagine if it was Tom Trbojevic? If you managed to land the other guy? Scary to think about, isn't it?
I don't want to think about it, really. Yeah. We'll just go back onto the junior footy now. Obviously, we've got this whole COVID lockdown going on. It looks like the boys are going to be missing another full season of Aaron Matthews, SG Ball, Jersey Flegg. How do you think this whole situation with less footy for the juniors is going to affect the NRL in the future? Oh,
it's going to be massive, mate, and I don't think people are prepared for it. And unless you're in the junior footy game and you're out there actually watching these games of football like you and me are, you don't realise the sort of effect it's going to have. We're already struggling to get enough kids. Like, I'm sure out your way it's heaps better. I see the amount of divisions and stuff you guys have got out there, but like over my way, there's just like I coach in the under-16s South Sydney comp, and 3 teams playing. There's 3 teams of 20. That's 60 kids that are age 16 that have decided I want to play rugby league this year. Like, that's unbelievable. We've had to merge with Main and St. George or Cronulla, one of those two comps, and it's an 8-team comp. So across all those divisions, there's 8 times 20? There's 160, 180 kids that have decided, I'm going to play rugby league this year. Like, it is tough, man. It's brutal. And then you get to that Harold Matts level, and obviously a lot of the kids from out Penrith and Parramatta your way, like my brother's in the Rooster system at the moment, and they played half of their Harold Matts last year. It got canned halfway through. Then they came back. They moved the age group up, which I also kind of disagree with. But anyway, and then he got to play a full Harold Matts season this year. But I mean, moving forward now, all these kids are going to come into a Harold Matts season without playing any footy all year. Some of them would be lucky enough to have played a bit of schoolboy footy and stuff, but it's tough. It's brutal. And especially, and like your forwards, your centers, your wingers, they'll be okay, but it's your halves. It's your halves that you're really going to feel the effect on, and your hookers as well. And even, I mean, I'm sure you'd agree. As we said, you look around this competition and there's 5 or 6 halfbacks you actually want on your team. You go and have a look at the halfbacks that are available for next season to be signed somewhere. They're dog shit. They've all got England written across their foreheads, with all due respect to them. We're just not producing the same class of halves. Like, I was talking to Finchy the other night about when he was playing, and mate, he would come up against a state of origin caliber halfback every second week. I mean, you look around, you obviously had Joey, but you had, Matty Orford, Brent Sherwin. Like, Orford and Sherwin never played origin during then because there was too many other good halfbacks. Like, if you put Shifty and Orford in the modern game, top 3 halfbacks for me straight away.
No, it's definitely a problem. But what I've noticed is that caliber of talent is shifting to fullback. Yep. You see a lot more. You see a lot more quality fullbacks. Like, it's so hard to rank 1 to 10 who your best fullbacks in the comp are, because there's just so many guys that can fill that position. And with the halfbacks, the most important thing for a halfback is game experience. I played a season in the halves myself back in me Division 3 Hills Bulls days.
Love it.
Gotta love it. That if I hadn't played it before, and the first couple of games I went out there and played, I'd look like a chicken with my head cut off. I didn't know what I was doing, and I can't relate to that bigger game experience for a half. It's hard to come out there and be switched on from day dot.
It's incredibly difficult, and these kids, they're not going to do it for. That's why, mate, I think what Sam Walker and like Toby Sexton have done, because they weren't playing rugby league last year. Sam Walker definitely wasn't. For him to come in and do what he's done, and that's something that no one talks about, which blows me away, that the kid, he missed his football from age 17 to 18, and he's walked into first grade, he's doing what he's doing, and I would like to, well, I don't like to think, but I would assume that he's going to be the exception to that, because so many kids that are missing out on so much footy. And that's the other thing as well. Like, so many of these kids that didn't play footy this year that were 18 or so, I mean, they were going to concentrate on footy this year. Do they now start to turn to, I should probably go out and get a job. I can't just sit here and do nothing for 6 to 8 months, So it's also going to be another wave of kids that you could lose there as well. So I think it's going to have a huge effect. And I think the way that we've moved the Harold Matts and the SG ball back, like it used to be under 16s and 18s, now it's 17s and 19s. And I look at SG ball and I mean, geez, you would have to be one hell of a serious footballer to keep playing SG ball when you're 19, when you're finished school, and you should probably be out getting a job, especially if you're from the country or something. You don't have a school to put you up in a place, a place to live or whatever. It's going to be really difficult to see. And I think eventually they're going to have to change it back at some point, but it means that another group has to miss out because they moved it a few years ago when I should have been the number one guy to say, yeah, move it back, because my brother missed out on half his Harold Matts season. But I just think that they should have just copped that on the chin and said, hey, it was a pandemic. What can we do, sort of thing, But it's a tough situation.
It's very, very tough for our juniors, and especially when it's becoming so much harder to get people into the game. Especially you see a lot of parents saying, no, I don't want my little scrawny white kid to go up against some of these big boys that we're seeing coming through.
Oh, mate, some of the kids are, especially from out your way, like And like you know better than anyone, every single Harold Matts team has a kid that appears one year that comes from nowhere and he's their best player. And they say, oh, where did he come from? And they'll say, oh, he didn't make the Parramatta side or he didn't make the Penrith side. And then they go to one of these other teams like Manly or the Roosters or South Sydney and they just absolutely brain it. Like the talent and the size out there is just crazy.
Yeah. Parramatta and Penrith juniors are looking very good. And that's why I watch our juniors and I think, but I watch the juniors most year and think, yeah, we're going good. We might be able to funnel through these guys. And then we end up losing them to Manly. There's a young player that plays Howard Matthews that absolutely tore us up in the grand final, Latu Fainu. He's the younger brother of Manisi. And he was a para junior. He plays out here for Guildford.
Yep.
And he's an absolute gun. But again, we lost him to Manly and he's coming out and he's flying. But again, he's a half. So you don't know if he's going to be able to come back in the future, come into SG ball and all that and be able to keep up his form and then make the NRL top 30.
And I think this is what people undervalue so much. You know, you talk about old players and guys that didn't play much first grade and people sort of giggle and it's like, fuck, do you realise how hard it is? Like, yeah, the guy that you think is the shittest NRL player, he's in the top 1% of people to ever play rugby league. It is so hard to make it through those ranks, get through all the injuries, get through all the politics, be at the right place at the right time, be at the right team at the right time. And, you know, you talk about guys like Matty Johns, for example. Like, he just came through in a bad era for 5'8". Like, if he was around now, he'd probably be a top 3 5'8" in the game instead of being a top 10 guy when he played. And he's unlucky. But then think about for every Matty Johns that's unlucky once they get to first grade, there are 1,000 guys that were just unlucky as they came through the position they were in, where they were, the injuries they had, the people that the coaches that did or didn't like them for whatever ridiculous reasons. Like, I think it's something that people take for granted way too much, how hard it is to make it into first grade. And you probably don't realise until you've got mates or you've got a brother or you've got someone who's trying to make it themselves. And it's so difficult.
Yeah, just to put it into perspective as well, I'll play footy with one of my mates who's just playing Division 1 footy, not even playing Howard Matthews, and they'll absolutely carve me up. They'll have so many more skills than I will. They'll tackle harder, run harder. But then again, you look at there's guys better than that playing Howard Matthews. And then you think, well, half of those Howard Matthews squads aren't going to make an NRL top 30. And then you think again, well, half of that NRL top 30 won't make their debut.
Probably 80% of those, probably 80, 90% of those Harold Matts teams won't play NRL. Like, it honestly is unbelievable. And then for every, you hear all the stories about all the guys that they make SG ball, they make the rep teams, you never hear of them again. And then the guys that didn't make it, they're normally better off because they're pissed off they didn't make it and they've got a point to prove. Yeah. People don't realise how hard it is to make it. Like, I remember when I was growing up in my under-16 team, we had an unreal team in South Sydney. We didn't lose a game for 2 or 3 years. I think we had 3 guys that were in the Australian schoolboy side. None of them went past under-20s, you know. It's just, and you could find 10,000 of those stories around the country. Every town's got a player that should have been one of the best ever that didn't make it to first grade, you know.
It's a very tough business to be in. You work your whole life towards a certain goal, and it's just, I feel bad for all the kids now because of the whole COVID situation going on. That it's going to shut a lot of kids' dreams off. Yep. Guys that were destined to do good things in rugby league that have just, this has sort of demolished their career, sort of thing. Just before you mentioned Toby Sexton, how he's going at half. I really like the look of him. I've loved how he's played for Gold Coast, and that brings us on to our next point. Do you think Gold Coast will be a contender for next year?
Contender to win the premiership? Probably not, realistically. I think they can definitely make the top 8. They just need to get the very best out of all those guys week in, week out. They're obviously spending a lot of money through the second row, which personally just doesn't really make sense to me. You have a look at all the teams that are doing well in this competition and paying their lock forward $1 million. Is anyone playing their second row $1 million? Like, it's not a position that leads directly to results, if you know what I mean.
I just had a few notes here down about what I thought about the Titans. I think they've got a top 6 forward pack in the competition. probably will have for a few years. But the fact that they're playing an edge player, my idea on who $1 million players are is fullback, halfback, lock forward now maybe, like a top lock forward may get $1 million. To pay an edge player who's realistically not going to get a lot of the ball a lot of the time, a lot of David Fafita's impact will come off running shape out to him. He's not going to be able to come in and take lots and lots of carries and do a lot of things with the ball. And that's probably that might ruin them in getting a next best player, a guy that's going to take them to the premiership. I think that their young players are very promising, like Toby Sexton, Gregory Marziu's doing great things over there. I think he can be like a Brian Toto sort of player with his tough carries, finds the front most of the time. Yeah, just the salary cap management may be an issue with the whole Dave Fafita situation.
Mentioned there, Dave Fafita playing in the second row, he can't come in and have X amount of carries in the middle. And, mate, to be honest with you, I don't understand why the Gold Coast Titans are sticking to such a traditionalist way of playing rugby league when they've got something that no one else does. And they're spending so much money on that one asset. Why are they sitting him out there in a corridor and not bringing him into the game more? Why are they, sure, play him in the second row, but give him a license. Let him just roam, let him go. I think we get stuck too often in these rigid ways of thinking with rugby league. And you have a look at the last decade, and I remember 3 years ago when I said, putting a front rower in at lock is the biggest waste of a position you could ever do. And people said, you're an idiot. Taumalolo runs for 1,000 metres, he does this, he does that. It's like, okay, sweet. The Cowboys don't win any games of football, though. It's not helping them. It's impressive on the stat sheet, and that's great. He's breaking records, but his team's not playing finals footy. It's so impressive to be doing that, but if it's not leading to results, what's the point? The Cowboys aren't putting asses in seats because Taumalolo makes 80 more metres than the next best forward. They're putting asses in seats because they're winning games and they're going to the finals. I just think the Titans, if they're going to go heavy on Tino and Dave Fafita, which I think you can get a result out of doing that, you need to play to those guys. It just doesn't make any sense to me personally, the way that they're going about their footy. I think they're just stuck in a rigid way of, let's just try and do what Melbourne are doing, what the Roosters are doing. You've got a different set of personnel and you've got to work to your strengths.
I have such respect for guys like Trent Robinson, Craig Bellamy. The way Craig Bellamy especially moves the game forward, he's a trendsetter. He looks at his side and he goes, well, I can't play this sort of footy anymore. I've got to change this other style of footy. So I heard Cameron Smith say, I think it was Denon's on SEN, what's it called, the captain's run. He said after that Sharks grand final where they got beat by getting bashed through the middle, Craig Bellamy, Cameron Smith sat down and said, we're going to just play a whole new style of footy now. We're going to they're playing, I think Dale Finucane was there the next year and he was playing more of a modern day locks sort of scenario. The guys started playing a lot more attacking footy, and the way that those guys like Craig Bellamy, Trent Robinson move the game forward and see how the new rules are progressing the game, it's just, I have so much respect for those guys.
Mate, it's a copycat league. Everyone copies what the guys are doing at the top. You look at the teams at the top now. Manly, they've got a ball playing 13. Roosters got a ball playing 13. Melbourne don't really, they sort of use their 13 a little bit differently with Brandon Smith, but I mean, he's still a smaller body with incredible leg speed. You look at the Penrith Panthers, Isaiah Yeo, he is just such a good footballer, and you'll start to get the other teams that'll start to copy it. And how on earth the Cowboys have decided to move away from Taumalolo at 13 and put him on an edge, that has just blown me away. I cannot together what on earth Todd Payton is doing up there. That just makes no sense to me in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no, I'd personally like to see Taumalolo play prop, just take tough carries. And I think the modern game allows for two sort of styles of lock. You've got your Isaiah Yeo, who ball plays, acts as the link man, or like a Cameron Murray, the way Cameron Murray sort of plays. And then you've got your sort of stronger bodies, but they're the guys that get your set started. So they're your guys that get into the line, find their front, get a quick play the ball going, and then off the back of that, you start to play your footy. You get your Tom Travojevic passing it out the back to Jason Saab, going the distance sort of thing. And I think Cameron Murray, for mine, is not already the number one lock in the competition. I'd have to say he's going to be soon. because he's got both. He's sort of got both. His carries are very tough. He gets the south set started. You'll see in a lot of their games, Cameron Murray will take a hit up and find his front, get a quick play of the ball. And then as soon as he does, Adam Reynolds is barking orders to start a swing set to the left. And it's just, it happens all the time and everybody knows it's going to happen, but it's just so good that they can't stop it.
Well, that's the thing about South Sydney. They don't play, like to some extent they do play that traditional sort of out the back, but they, and Manly's the same. They go out the back and they spread the ball as soon as they see that they get the advantage. Whether it's first, second, third, whatever, they don't always wait till fourth tackle. They just wait till Cam Murray puts his nose through or one of those guys grabs a slight advantage and then they go. And back to your point about Cam Murray being the best lock forward, I wouldn't argue with that at all. He has to be right up there, the very best of them. But I think your lock forward role, it comes down to how you want to play footy. Like Cam Murray is perfect for South Sydney. But I think like when you look at the Roosters, like Radley is perfect for the way that they play as well. I think Isaiah Yeo is perfect for the way that Penrith play, So it all sort of depends how you go about your footy. And that's the beauty of the 13 role. It's a position that you can sort of pick whatever sort of footballer you want there and you can make it work in your own little way. And there's a lot of teams that haven't been, the vast majority of teams haven't been able to work that out. Like we're just talking about the Titans. I think it was Sam McIntyre started there on the weekend. You had Herman Essa, you had Tyrone Peach. Like they've got no clue whatsoever what they're doing with that jersey. Tino's been there as well. They haven't worked it out because they're trying to copy what these other teams are doing, but they just can't emulate it essentially.
Just another point on what you said before about them scoring on first and second tackle. I don't know if you watch About Even, the Hello Sports betting show that they've got going on, but on that, Michael Pride, who's their sort of professional gambler they got on, he does a little segment at the end where he goes through a stat about the modern game and how they can sort of evolve on it. And he said the top 6 teams in the competition in attack, like just to watch sort of thing, they score more tries from zero tackle to second tackle than any other team in the comp. Because I think the stats were Storm, Titans, Roosters, Rabbitohs, Panthers, and Manly score more tries from zero to second tackle than any other team in the comp, and they score less in 3 to 5 than any other sort of team in the comp because they don't care. They'll play expansive footy when they have to. They don't take settler tackles to get up the field and then spread it on a set play. They'll just play a bit more eyes up footy, which I think really works in the modern game.
I think the other thing about, without listening to him talk about that, but the first thing that comes to my mind is that, yes, those teams are scoring more on 0, 1, and 2, but realistically in the modern game, I'd love to see a deeper stat on how many of those are actually tackle 7, 8, 9, 10. How many of them are scoring tries off these 6 again calls, which, yeah, it's tackle 0 or 1, but it's off the back of them winning the momentum on third and fourth, the set before, and then rolling into it. And, I mean, mate, we've gone through 60-odd years of rugby league of making 5 tackles, kick the ball, and it's over. All of a sudden, these guys now, they're having to make, at sometimes 11, 10, 12 tackles in a row, and that's where you really get your advantage. That stat doesn't surprise me in the slightest, to be honest with you, because as I said, your top teams like your Manly and your South Sydney Rabbitohs, as soon as they've got the advantage, they just go, yep, let's click into gear, and you have to be well coached to do that. That means that all of your players have to be in the right position or be able to just look at the play of the ball and go, okay, this is it. Let's go. We're on here. Yeah, it's not a halfback saying we're going to 80%, then we're going to swing back. We're going to do this. You don't get 2 tackles to prepare for that. You've just got to be ready to fall into your place whenever it's on as soon as you win a tackle. So, yeah, I mean, once again, as it has always been with rugby league, it comes back to the best coached teams for me.
No, momentum now is the most important thing to have.
Yep.
As soon as you got the ascendancy, you've just got to attack and you just got to keep building on that momentum as much as you can. Score as many points as soon as you can, because as soon as the other team has momentum, all of a sudden you're on your line and you're defending 11, 12, 13 tackles without sort of a break.
And then you're cooked, mate. And then the teams. The vast majority of teams haven't adapted to this yet, and you can even see like the Gold Coast Titans the other night. They came out firing against the Melbourne Storm. They got them on the back foot, and like the Melbourne Storm are a good enough team to wrestle their way back into it. But there's only about 4 teams that would have wrestled their way back into that, because that momentum just kills 80% of teams in this competition.
that's sort of the gap between the top six and the rest of the competition. I think that's what it's sort of built on, is just the fact that the top six teams will capitalise on that momentum, and the bottom teams, I guess, you can't say they aren't coached well, but they aren't coached as well as the other sides are to sort of capitalise on that momentum, play a little bit of eyes-up footy, give their halves a licence. Like, I think Cody Walker, when I say eyes-up footy, because he's just, as soon as they have momentum, he's on the ball and he's throwing cutouts to Alex Johnson. That's part of the reason he's the leading try scorer in the comp, because he's always there, ready to score off any tiny, tiny bit of momentum they have.
And that's where, mate, a guy like Cody Walker is getting all the raps in the world, which he should be, but fuck, so much of that comes down to Adam Reynolds inside him and the platform that he is constantly laying, the way that he squares up a line. I mean, you go and watch every single pass that Cody Walker's thrown this year and watch the guy that gives him the ball, watch the guy that goes into the mouth of the defense, that takes the back rower with him and creates that space for Walker. It's Adam Reynolds, and that's what we spoke about. There's only a couple of halfbacks you want in this competition. Adam Reynolds, without a doubt, he's one of them.
For sure. I just love watching that Rabbitohs left edge go.
It's unreal,
yeah. I hate it when they're playing Para, because Para's right edge is a little bit, it's not sound in defence, so they just towel us up every time we play them. Like, I think we've conceded 38 points against them the last 6 times we played them, because they just carve us up down that left edge. It's so good to watch. It's like a well-oiled machine.
It is, mate. It is, and the best thing is that it's not like the Melbourne Storm for years were very similar, but they had your Cooper Cronks and they were a little bit robotic, and every single time it looked the exact same. But you just know that with South Sydney, you've got those Indigenous boys that are so talented that as much as it's the same every time, it always looks a little bit different, and it's so high octane. It's so good to watch that South. As I imagine when they're up against Parramatta, it must suck, but I'm sure still there must be that traditionalist inside you that still enjoys watching just that rugby league poetry. And I mean, mate, you have a look at all those tries and, you see what Adam Reynolds sees, and you look at the defensive line, you're like, they're not short, they're not in trouble, they're not panicking, but South Sydney, they just make it look so easy. They just make good defence look stupid in an instant.
I've never seen a winger play that much touch football in my life. Like Alex Johnson, he just walks over the try line every single time, because he just gets the ball put on his chest. And he's a great finisher when he has to be, but a lot of the time, the guys on the inside of him, the Cameron Murrays, the Adam Reynolds, the Cody Walkers, are just setting it up for him to just walk over.
And I think it was one thing that I think for the first 15, 16 weeks or whatever, we all sort of went, AJ's scoring tries because he's outside them. But then a couple of weeks ago, when you saw Mansour go over there, and you could just tell it just wasn't the same. There was a couple of times where Mansour got run down and stuff. Like, I think Mansour going there has shown also just how much of a special talent AJ is as well.
Yeah. Oh, AJ's a great finisher. He's always where he has to be. Yeah. That's something that a lot of people underappreciate about a winger.
Reliability, yeah.
Yeah, positional play. Like how deep or how forward a certain winger is, AJ seems to get it perfect every time. Whereas you see other guys in the competition are either a little bit too deep or a little bit too short, and balls go out the back over the sideline. Whereas AJ, every single time he's waiting for that ball out to him, he's in the perfect position.
It's one of those things that you assume just being in the right position is easy, but having your run with a ball that is being passed 40 metres inside you and timing it perfectly to be there, whether it's a cutout, whether it's just draw and pass down the line, it's incredibly difficult. And then, mate, like people that have played footy understand, even catching a ball at that pace, I mean, it's not easy, especially when you got a sliding defence that's coming at you that's ready to clean you up. I think wingers are a really tough stick in the modern day. It's a lot harder than what people give them credit for.
No, I've got a lot of respect for Alex Johnson, because he's just perfect in everything he does in positional play. And a lot of the great finishers are like Ruben Garrick and Jason Saab now are starting to get really good combination with Tom Trbojevic. They're starting to get it right. Even Daly Cherry Evans, when he throws that 3-man cutout to Saab, it seems to work most of the time.
And mate, it's that fact that they spend so much time together. Like, I have no doubt whatsoever, Josh Adokar, the best winger in the game for me, he's going to arrive at Canterbury next year. He's going to look a little bit clunky to start, because he is so used to working with that Melbourne side, working with Olam, Munster. It is going to take time, but you're right. Like, I mean, Ruben Garrick and Saab, I mean, when they were at the Dragons, honestly, I thought they were both quick, but I didn't think either of them could really play, to be honest with you. But you give them time with an experienced half and a system they're used to and consistent reps, everything changes.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Bulldogs, next year, you talked about Josh Addo-Carr going down there and looking at a place. I think I said this before. For the Bulldogs, everybody talks about how good the players are going down there, but I start to question, is it how good the players are obviously very good, but are they a little bit better because of the systems they're in? I think Matt Burton with the Panthers, he's so good there because he's got a good forward pack pushing him forward. He's got guys that are creating momentum for him, so then he can do what he wants essentially. Whereas at the Bulldogs, he's going to have to create a little bit for himself. And same with Josh Addo-Carr. I think you'll see him not be scoring as many tries, not looking as sharp, because he won't have Cameron Munster inside of him. He's grown such a good partnership with him, especially with the long kicks over the top that he chases down. Like, I don't see Matt Burton or Kyle Flanagan putting those kicks in for him, putting it straight on the dime for him to chase down, or the two-man cutouts to him where he just gasses the fullback, gasses the winger. And I just don't see those guys being as good when they get down there. Sure, Canterbury can build the systems to be a little bit better, but it's going to take some time for those guys to gel down there. And I wouldn't hold my breath as a Canterbury fan for finals footy next year, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure, mate. And I mean, that's just the reality of teams that are struggling in this competition. I sort of feel the same, that they are getting a little bit overhyped, but what else do you do as Canterbury? You know, you got to go out and get the best players that you possibly can to try and change that. And yes, Matty Burton and Josh Addo-Carr, these sort of guys, they might not be the same players they were at their old clubs, because those old clubs are so much better than the club they're going to. But at least you have an opportunity to start to bring some of that culture over. And I mean, like, it has happened before where we've had guys signed to clubs in the past and they have changed the culture of that club. And, you know, every guy isn't going to be like that. But if you're at the bottom of this competition, you sort of, blokes aren't lining up to go to Canterbury, yeah? And the guys that are going to Canterbury, they've been given a good whack of money to go there. So, like, they're not like the Melbourne Storm where they've got people ringing them saying, hey, can I come to your club? Canterbury's ringing teams and going, hey, what have they offered you? I'll give you an extra $200K and you can play whatever fucking position you want. Please come to us. It's hard to get off the bottom, and you've got to take a couple of risks. And I kind of like the risks they've had taken this year. We've spoken about Burton and Addo-Carr. I don't think they'll be as good as their previous clubs, but I think they'll still be very solid. I think the Paul Vaughan and the Dufty one, I'm not a huge fan of both of those guys, but both have shown that they can play. And I like that they've signed them on a 1-year contract. And to me, a 1-year contract says you got to perform or you're going to England. This is your last chance sort of thing, you know. And I like it when guys have got their backs against the wall. Like, you look at Bryce Cartwright in your team this year, I think that's been a big factor of him playing good footy again, because it was, Bryce, you've got to show that you want to play first grade this year or you're going to go to England. No one else is going to take a punt on you.
Yeah. No, that's why, just back on the Bulldogs recruitment, I love the fact that they've got Gus Gould in there, because people trust his philosophies, what he's done over there at Penrith with his 5-year plan that turned 8-year plan. But the stuff that Gus Gould can do, can say, that will lure a lot of players in for less money. It will help their recruitment be better. But realistically, it's so hard in the NRL to rebuild as a club. Oh, no, Para coming off like 2 or 3 wooden spoons. It takes time to come back because, like you said, you need those key players that draw guys over, but you can't get those key players if you don't have them already in your side, sort of thing.
And, mate, look how well your club has rebuilt. People forget you guys were coming dead last a couple of years ago. Look how well you've rebuilt and how criticised you're still getting. You've come so far. Mate, it's like there's a set of stairs and there's 10 steps. You're sitting on the 9th step and people are still like, it's so hard to rebuild. And Canterbury, I mean, if you said to me, we're going to go into a meeting and try and lure one of the top players in the team, we'll take our best player to talk to them. Who are you taking?
You taking Gus Gould?
Yeah, well, now you take Gus Gould, yeah. But before that, I mean, Josh Jackson, I mean, not really a needle mover for me. Like, good defender, really solid. But, I know I'm probably not going to win a comp there with Josh Jackson sort of thing. And even if you look at the New Zealand Warriors, like, obviously they've had Peter O'Sullivan for a couple of years. He's done unreal. But Phil Gould walked in there at the start of the season. You've had Reece Walsh, you've had Matt Lodge, you've had Dallin Watene-Zelezniak arrive there. Like, these guys, they matter. And I call them lounge room guys, because Phil Gould is a guy that he'll go to young players, he'll sit in a lounge room, he'll have a beer with the dad, he'll have a cup of tea with the mum, and he'll talk them into coming to Canterbury because he's got that sort of aura about him.
I just like a few of the young signings that they've gotten. You might have heard of Josh Stuckey. They signed him a few days ago. He's a second rower out of Q Cup. He looks pretty promising. And then you've got Joshua Cook from the Bunnies. I don't know if that's confirmed or not, but I've heard things about him signing there. That could fill their hooker role for a little bit. He looks very promising as well. It's those sort of guys that Gus Gould is so good at finding. He's good at finding young talent as well.
Yep.
And that's massive for a club trying to rebuild. It's finding young talent because they're going to take less money to join your club. And then if they turn out to be the goods, they can build into those key players.
And I think that's the other thing too, mate. Like there are, as much as they've struggled, for me, there are a handful of guys in that Canterbury team right now that are really talented. They just haven't got the best out of them. I look at Jake Averillo. I think he could be absolutely anything. I look at the kid that's made his debut a couple of weeks ago, Beyond Iodo. I mean, he could be anything as well. Yeah, like there is a core there of a football team that could be decent, and getting guys like Josh Cook, I kind of half know Josh, and he is just such a good guy. He's the sort of fella you'd be more than happy to build a club around, and he's such a good hooker. I can't believe have let him go. I mean, and it's funny, him and the kid that he's competing with at the moment, Pete Mamazelis, he's played a couple of games at first grade. I mean, every time that I've seen those two, because they went to the same school and everything, every team I've seen them in South Sydney, it was always Josh Cook that was the better player than him. So he must have really impressed over the last few months, because Josh is also, his family is just South Sydney through and through. Like, you could not find a more South Sydney family than the Cooks, and it's unfortunate how that one's played out. I haven't got it confirmed if he is going or not, but I'm pretty confident he's not staying at South Sydney. And if those links are to Canterbury, normally where there's smoke, there's fire in rugby league, isn't there?
Well, you hear about signings 5 months before they're confirmed, because it's just, as soon as rumour gets out into the media, it's just everywhere, and those rumours tend to come from good sources.
Yep.
Like a lot of the leaks we see, they end up being true, but there's also some that I hope, for Bulldogs' sake, that they do get him, because they do need a hooker desperately. But then again, they've already got Bailey Biondi-Odo, who I'm pretty sure his best position is hooker. And I liked seeing him play there. I think I watched him in the, I think it was 3 weeks ago. I can't remember who they played, but he had a great game. And I just thought, well, why hasn't this kid been starting already? Like, why hasn't this kid had a crack? And then they put him to halfback, I think, 2 weeks ago. I was just like,
oh, mate, I think the exact same thing as you. And I said on Denon's podcast the other day that I think his best position is hooker. And Denon said to me, isn't he a halfback? And I said, oh, not from what I've seen. But, mate, the amount of Canterbury people that messaged me off the back of that and said he's always been a halfback, that's his better position, has really surprised me. I'm the same as you. He looks like an out-and-out dummy half to me. I think as well at Canterbury, Jeremy Marshall-King's gone to a new level. I thought he was just going to always be a meat and potatoes hooker. He's really impressed me this year. So, as I said, mate, there's a heap of options there. I think as well, the big thing heading into next year for them is, yes, they got these signings, but they get Raymond Faitala-Mariner back. I think he is just criminally underrated. Oh, mate, he's huge, and he's so suited to the modern game. He's the sort of fella that they need in that team, I think. So, mate, there is huge potential there, and you're right. I think of all the signings, Phil Gould, he probably is the best one.
It's just the Bulldogs. They've got a lot of shining lights coming into next year. They've got a lot of things that can go very good for them. It'll take time. It just takes time in the NRL to rebuild.
As does everything, mate. As does everything in rugby league. Takes time, yeah.
I think we'll just wrap it up now. We've gone through everything. Thanks for coming on, mate. Really appreciate you coming on to this. It's great chatting with you. Great analysis. Just make sure, again, always, all go follow the socials. Go follow the Guru if you don't already. Twitter, Instagram, all that sort of thing. What else are you on?
No, mate, that's about it. I've got the podcast as well, which I'll drop this on my podcast as well. So give all of your socials a plug, mate, because all my listeners and followers, I want you to go and follow as well. So where can they find you, mate?
Just Twitter and Instagram so far, just at Short Ball.
Short Ball, beautiful. No, mate, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thoroughly enjoyed this chat. It was sensational.
Great chat. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
This preseason, take football further with NFL Game Pass.
We make plays, we dominate all night long.
Catch every rookie debut with live out-of-market preseason games.
Welcome to the NFL.
See big names in their new homes.
And here comes one. Julio Jones, touchdown.
Plus, get all the action in 45 minutes or less with condensed game replays.
Oh, my goodness.
Take football further with NFL Game Pass. Go to NFL.com/Game Pass to start your free trial today.